So the question is, and I'll type it in here too, is were you at the first training? And are you using an iPhone or an Android?
I also want to encourage those who have access to web to turn your webcams on, just so we can have this web training a little bit more interactive. It would be nice to see your faces as well. I can put a face to the name. Thank you. Nicola, you're seeing the responses?
Yeah, it's interesting that a lot of folks are using an Android for work, iPhone at home, and Android for work. So the demonstrations that I'm going to do today will be on my iPhone, but many of them are very similar on the Android, and I'll go through just maybe some of the small differences to pay attention to. But I think that just looking online, because I have an iPhone, that they're pretty similar. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get rolling. A few just like housekeeping things. Early, if you probably can see, if you scroll up in the chat box, I provided a hyperlink to my website where you can download this training. It's virtually the same that Deanna sent a couple of days ago. I added a couple more slides. And there's also a cell phone safety flow chart that I'll be using during part of the training. You might want to go ahead and just download that. That way you can really zoom in and take a look at it. And I try to keep all of these resources up at least probably until the next training around January. And then I'll sub them out, and I can, if you ever lose any of these, you can always email me and I can send them to you. But we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Deanna, can you just verbally confirm that you can see it, just since I can't see my own self? You can see everything?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So we're just I'll start by going over a couple of things that we talked about in the first training, since not everyone was here. So in our first training, we did a web call with Erica Olson from NNEDB. And what she shared with us is in 2014, NNEDB did a survey of, I think it was around 350 participants throughout the U.S., all DV providers, asking what were the most commonly encountered forms of tech abuse. And the two things that came up were both text messaging and social media accounts. And so we've really tried to gear all of the trainings that we're doing for Jane Doe in that direction. We know that there are often a lot of trainings that cover things that are like more the really scary types of spyware, malware, and although those are concerns, what you're likely encountering in the field are the abuse of text messaging, cell phone abuse, and things that are happening through social media. So this is just a really basic statistic. You probably would assume the majority of the abuse that's happening on social media is happening over Facebook. And that isn't to say that it's not happening on the other accounts, but that's typically where survivors are. So that's where most of it is getting reported. And I really liked this quote I just wanted to highlight from the report, which is, abusers go where survivors are and they disrupt the technologies that survivors use. The technology itself does not necessarily increase or enhance abuse, but but because the technology provides access to where the survivors are. So that's where the abuse occurs. So I really liked this quote because I think it helps to just continue to center the way that we're moving about these trainings, which is that we want to be talking about, yes, planning for tech safety, but also tech empowerment, and to always be mindfully separating the fear of technology from what we're trying to build with tech safety empowerment. The other thing I'll mention is that if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please stop us. You can send them through the chat box, and then Deanna will interrupt me because I can't see the text box from my angle since I'm sharing my screen. And I would really encourage you, in fact, to share those things because as I mentioned, this is really the only study that we have. It's from 2014, and so much has changed since this report. For example, the types of technology, types of devices that folks are using have changed, and people are increasingly more smartphone dependent, which probably doesn't surprise you. And so that therefore impacts the type of abuse that we're seeing. And we really want to make sure that whatever we're training on is most apropos for the frontline advocates. And so if you have anything that comes up or you have any questions, please do put them in the box and we'll make sure we can try to answer them. Okay, I'm just going to pause 1 second. I have to adjust something. Okay, so what we'll be working with today is I'm going to go through a few areas that are really focused in on your cell phone. So we're going to go through passcodes and passwords, all the various places in which location is tracked on smartphones. We're going to talk about just some best practices with how to make sure you're just doing good management over what I'm calling like keeping your cell phone clean. So just, there's a lot of things going on all of the time on there. Even I forget to go in there and see what's still loading. So what are some of the best practices to keep things tidy and then safe? We're going to walk through what I'm calling cell phone safety planning. And so what I've discovered through a lot of these trainings is that I can't train you on every small technology, but what I can do is I can try to help provide a really solid rubric so that along with the very tangible skills we'll be providing will help to provide the roadmap for you when you're working with survivors. And then we're going to begin to touch on understanding the pros and cons of the DB apps, but we're going to go into that a little bit more in depth and which exactly they are when we talk about using technology for social change. So this is a survey I want to propose to the crowd. You can answer in the text box, which is what percentage of people do you think do not have a passcode on their smartphone? And I'll give you a second to respond.
So we're seeing 60%, 40%, 20%, 50%, 70%.
Wow, that's interesting. That's a lot higher than I thought. So I had given this presentation before when I would ask people, make sure you have a passcode on your smartphone. I assumed that everyone already knew that. And actually the statistics that you all are providing are much closer. So 36% of people use a 4-digit passcode on their smartphone. Passwords that are more than 4 digits are considered safer. So even if an additional digit, a 5th digit would be much better. Only 11% of smartphone users use a 5-digit passcode. And then 34% of people don't take any security measures whatsoever in protecting their smartphones. And so you're thinking about how much stuff is on your phone. And to me, these were really shocking statistics. And so I'm going to go into a demo and show you, how you can update your passcode. But let's go through a few more statistics here. 54% of people used 5 or fewer passwords throughout their entire life, which is also, really an alarming statistic. And that the most common password, does anyone want to guess in the chat box what the most common password is?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What is the most commonly used password?
Birthday. Somebody's birthday.
No. Anyone? Any other guesses? Were there any other?
Family names.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, that's it. That is the most commonly used password. And it's true, a lot of people do use families' names or their birth dates, but sad to say that the most common one is 1, 2, 3, 4. Most people's passwords are easily breakable. One of the reasons why you want to have the fifth digit is that it like drastically increases the number of hours it would take to try to break that code. Most people are using the same password everywhere. And one of the other alarming statistics is that even though 40% of these folks have been hacked, they continue to use the same password and will likely use their same password for the majority of their technological life. So the big lesson is, we want to make sure that we're at a minimum making sure that people are using passcodes, and then we'll go into additional digits and then how to craft a safer password. So now I'm going to navigate to my own phone to show you how to do that. Okay. You can see all of the stuff on my own desktop. Okay, Deanna, can you see my smartphone?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. And you can also see how incredibly organized I am with my files.
Yes, that is actually beautiful.
Okay, I was being sarcastic, but
I know.
So this is probably what most of you are familiar with. If you navigate to your settings, this is where you're going to be able to change your passcode. So I changed mine today because you'll be able to see my passcode through this demo. So you're going to select here passcode. In order to change any of the settings, you have to add the password. And then you can go here to change the passcode. So if you all have an iPhone probably in the last year, the default setting used to be 4 digits. So when you go in, you may be a little bit confused if you have the 4 digits and you're putting in the 4 digits again. You have to put start with the 4 digits to then upgrade to the 6. So this is a very simple thing to do. It's something you can work with a client on, making sure at a minimum here that they have their passcode turned on. This is where you would turn it off. And then you can go through the 2-factor authentication of having them also put in their fingerprint. And we'll go through more examples of 2-finger authentication throughout the training, but this is pretty simple, right? This took like all of 10 seconds to make sure that you have a passcode on your phone. It's very, very similar with Android. The only 2 things that I would highlight that are different with Android is, one, the Android has the ability when you go onto the home screen to do where you kind of connect the dots, 3 different dots. You're doing kind of like a shape that you've memorized. That's actually considered not very secure. It's very easy for people to see that. And it's much better to still do the passcode. Android lets you save a password up to 17 characters long. So you really do have quite a few options there. Before I migrate away from this screen, does anyone have any questions about that, or they need to see that again? And I can see your questions now in the chat box. No? Okay, great. So you will all go and talk to your clients about making sure they have a passcode, because we don't want the 36% statistic continuing any longer. Okay.
Nicole?
Yeah.
Would you be talking about any recommendations for those who may not necessarily remember their passwords, and that may be the reason why they choose like the 1, 2, 3, 4, or their birthday, or their name, or whatever, and then they use that for everything, as you were saying. will you be talking about different ways that they could potentially create different ones and keep track of them?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely be covering that. Okay, so I'm going to migrate back to my screen.
Thanks, you too.
Okay, so as Deanna mentioned, one of the issues of why a lot of people use the same password over and over again is that it can be hard to remember. So what I would recommend doing is sort of like, and this is my recommendation, not you don't have to adapt this, but this is how I do it for myself and would probably be the easiest for you if you're having the same trouble. So break your passwords into two levels, I would say. One are the passwords that you need every day that are that need to be most secure. So I would put email into that category, bank accounts, and then your passcode on your phone. You probably will remember the passcode on your phone because you're just you're constantly using that. Your passcode should be required almost immediately after you're not using your cell phone. With your email, however, that again is probably something that you're using frequently enough that you're not going to forget. And so the recommendations that people have for that is to pick something that's easy for you to remember, but is hard to guess. And then following the formula here, you want to make sure that it's 8 characters long, that it has a mixture of numbers, capital letters, and symbols. And then the similar type of concept you want to use for your bank account. For all your other various accounts, like I probably have 20 plus other accounts that I have to maintain, from like student loans or like various subscriptions that I am part of. I put all of those into a Google Doc that's password protected by my email. So you'd have to get into the email account and then know the name of that file to be able to find all of those. I don't think it's necessary that those you need to memorize them. Most people probably will forget those anyway. And then I think it's okay that you have them in a password protected file. You can also make sure that your email is has the two-factor authentication. So what this will do is it will alert you, if you're signing in from a device or a location that you previously weren't in. If you're using Gmail, you can actually go in and see the history of all the places that your account has been accessed. So to me, that provides me with enough, I guess, like mental safety that it's okay to keep the passwords there. Things I would not recommend doing are writing them on a little piece of paper. One really bad practice that I've seen a lot of us use, actually even professionally, is to write the passwords down on a sticky note and then like place them under like your keyboard. We do that with voicemail a lot of the time. That's a really bad idea. One of the previous trainings that I did over the last few weeks, someone had said that one of their clients had been keeping them all in a notebook, and they felt that was more secure because then they would have that notebook and their perpetrator wouldn't see it. And what had actually happened was that the abuser took a photo of that page and had the photo of all their passwords on their smartphone. So I feel like keeping it on paper in some ways feels less secure than keeping it password protected electronically. We went over this already, which is like you don't want to use the same password over and over again. We remember the statistics, like 54% of people are using the same passwords over and over again for their whole lives. And the last piece is to not share your password. And I think that this is something that Americans are particularly like this. People still feel like this is a trust issue. Like if you're not giving your passwords out to your loved ones, that you're suspicious of them or something like that. And it's not like that at all. Like we really need to change the culture around that not sharing your passwords is just like a good, safe practice, and says nothing about like what you think or value about another person. So this is a really great website, and I'll navigate to it this to help what Deanna was asking. It's a password generator, and I love this because, one, it's from Norton Antivirus, so it's really secure, and you probably have signed up for an account that's like, you need a password that's 6 characters long with 2 bells and whistles and a punctuation mark and a small letter. This allows you to do all of that. So let's just say 6 long, I want mixed cases, no numbers, generate password. There you go. It gives you a password that they know meets the standards of it being secure. And I feel confident that this is a safe place for people to create new passwords. I'm just curious, has anyone used one of these password generators before?
I'm going to unmute everybody, so in case you would like to. Nope.
Okay.
It's the one that your iPhone gives you sometimes.
I think the other tip that I didn't write on here that I've seen in other places that people say is you should never pick a word in your password that could be found in a dictionary. So I think what that means is like you can maybe use proper nouns, but beyond that, you should really use character combinations, and that those passwords that have dictionary words are the easiest to hack. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is two-factor authentication. And someone asked in the last training if it was possible to add two-factor authentication where it's not available. And I did some research, and I don't believe that that's possible. Just to give a little background to those who might not know what two-factor authentication is, this is a way of signing in. So it's your 2 pieces of information that will be required to open a system. The one that people are most commonly familiar with is when you sign into an account and then it's asking to send you a text message where you have a confirmation code. That's probably the one most of us use. And this website is really great because it helps you figure out how to turn on your two-factor authentication on just about every website you have. So I just searched earlier today for Bank of America. And you click here, and it migrates you right to the page where you can figure out how to turn on the two-factor authentication. What I also like about this is that a lot of the systems have different names for this. So like, for example, this is called the Safe Pass. And so if you're helping someone and they're like, trying to Google two-factor authentication for Chase Bank or something like that, and they have a totally different industry term for it, will help break through all of that. And then if you wanted to do like a little additional advocacy on it, let's see if I find one that probably wouldn't have it. Let's see. Okay, here's a good example. So what this is saying is that there is not two-factor authentication available, let's say for your Starbucks card, but if you wanted to tell Starbucks to add two-factor authentication, this will allow you to directly message them. So there's a little bit of tech advocacy happening there. But I would recommend this site. This is the most comprehensive for those people who might be curious, like how can you tell if something's a legit site? I feel like if it's a .org, that's always a good sign. A .org has gone through the rigorous process of becoming a nonprofit and a 501c3. So it's different than just like your general information that's floating on the internet. Okay. Okay, so location. The good news about, the bad news about location is that there are about 29 plus ways on your phone for your location to be tracked. The good news is that at least in the case of an iPhone, those seem to be really consolidated into a few places. So I'm going to go through them on my iPhone. We're going to go over frequent locations, figuring out like how to turn on and off the location settings on your apps, what to do about geotagging, and find my friends in GPS. So I'm going to go back to my iPhone to show you how to do that. All right. So we'll just go back to the home screen. So you can see, so I'm here on my home screen. I'm going to navigate to settings. Privacy. And then you want to go here to location services. And what this helps you to do is it lets you see the breakdown of all the apps that you have that require location and the degree to which you have consented to share your location. There are, yes, never, only while using. One good habit just to have is to, make sure that all the apps that you have on your cell phone, you absolutely need them at that point, and that you don't just have random apps you've built up that you might be sharing your location settings. So this is very easy. We'll just go ahead and check into Instagram, for example. So that you can see you can never or while using the app. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory in terms of where you find your locations. Okay. Now we're going to go back and we talked about geotagging. So the most common place that geotagging happens where people don't realize is on photos. So what can happen with that is, let's say if you're back in your settings and let's see, you go to location settings and then your camera, and let's say that you had this turned on. What would then happen is that when you take a photo, then that photo would be stamped with a location of where that photo was taken. And then let's say you unwittingly sent that photo to someone else. If you had the location stamp turned on, they could actually open that up in their own photos and be able to see where you took that. So you can immediately see how this is a safety risk for, let's say, teens that are sending photos. They don't realize that they're sharing their location by sharing the photos, but it's happening. So I would say the best way to, the safest is just to always have this off. You can always tag your photos manually versus just having them coming through automatically. So that's the geotagging. There's also geotagging that happens on social media, as you know. We'll be going through that during the social media training, but that's the other place that geotagging is happening. And now the Find Your Friends app. So if you go to your home screen, this is one of those things that a lot of people accept invitations for and don't realize that they've done so. Just find a friends. I have 2 people I share my, okay, I'm going to turn my phone off of. Okay. So this allows you to see exactly where your friends are currently. You may recognize some of these individuals that I share my location with. And you can also, put alerts. So I, for example, tested this out to put an alert that will notify me when my partner goes somewhere. So this is something just to, people don't even realize is on their phone or that they may have been sharing their location. I, have opted into this because, we're talking about tech empowerment. I would want these 2 people to know where I am if I went missing, but that's, a trust thing that I have created. But it's important to just have people look in and see how they feel about it. You also don't always have to share your location. You can turn it on or off. Let's say you're going on a hike, something like that. It seems very, obvious when you're explaining it, but I think it's just that people don't realize what they're opting into. So I'm going to pause so far Does anyone have any questions about the locations that I've shared so far, or the location settings? Are there any others that you have used before that you didn't realize were there? Okay, so now I'm going to talk about one that people, go ahead.
Nicole, one that I have noticed is there's also a way where every time that you use a map, it would also record in your locations.
Yes, exactly. So that's this next one I'm going to show you. This is the one that really freaks people out. It's the share my location. And you can turn this on or off. And what this enables you to do is, this is sending information to marketers, basically. You can opt in. It can help you, let's say, for example, get targeted news or targeted weather. So it, in some ways, is good for the consumer. It is negative in the sense that if you opted to send the report out, let's say you have a problem with your cell phone and you send the report directly from your phone, it can also be transferring other information. iPhones, the Apple and the Mac people have said that they aren't just going to willy-nilly share that information. This is not the case with Android phones. Android phones are actually automatically uploading this information to Google. So the best thing to do is just keep the sharing your location setting off. You can completely turn that off and your GPS will still work for the purposes of your maps. So that's the thing that people are, often like, well, I still will need it for my GPS. You can turn that off and your GPS will still work. Any questions? All right. I will go back to the presentation. Okay, so some good practices, as we discussed earlier about your phone. You want to keep yourself signed out of your accounts, especially if there aren't things that you need all of the time. Most of the things that require more security, like your bank accounts, they automatically sign you out. But a lot of people, maybe if you're navigating to some of these things in the browser versus the application, it could stay in there. I've always joked, if you open if you were to look at like how many windows you have open in your cell phone browser, it's probably like over 20. And so I think that that's like probably where more of the security breaches happen. And I also think that that probably happens for folks who are less technologically savvy. They're like less likely to download the proper application to access the resource and are probably more likely to just try to navigate it through the web browser feature. So you want to sign out. You don't want to save the passwords in your cell phone. As we talked about earlier, delete all the apps that you aren't using.
I would not, no.
Oh, did someone have a question?
There's someone who has more of a comment. I'm not sure if sharing settings for apps when turn off will help with turning off personal settings.
Say that one more time.
I'm not sure if sharing settings for apps when turning off will help with turning off personal settings.
I'm not sure quite what the question is, but I can take a guess that it might mean that there are two categories of settings. One is like your personal settings that you might have in your app. So like, let's say with Facebook, you have a whole set of privacy settings that you're working with that you probably have figured out by actually navigating through Facebook itself. And then there's this additional piece, which is the location settings. And those exist separately from the settings you're seeing in Facebook, the application. And we'll go through that more in depth during the social media training. But I think what this helps to raise is that there are a lot of applications that are requiring that you share your location, at least even temporarily, to be able to use them. And what's hard about it is that if you're trying to figure out within the application itself how to turn the location setting on and off, it may not be there, or you may have gone through all of the privacy settings and feel that you're safe in that regard. But what's really happening is that the phone is asking you, like, would you be willing to share the location with the application? So it's the two different levels of safety that you have to consider. Does that help to answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the next piece is that to know where your data is going and how it's being saved. And one thing that people had a lot of fear about early on with the cloud was like, where is all this information going? Like, I think we just have a lack of understanding of what the cloud is. And so I think that that's why people feel unsafe. And if anyone could guess, like, what is the number one reason why the information that people send to the cloud is hacked?
Could you repeat your question, Nicole, please?
Sure. What is the number one reason why information that you send to the cloud gets hacked?
I will unmute everybody at this moment in case you want to say something.
Or you can put it in the chat. You can even just guess.
People can guess your password.
Yep, exactly. So the cloud itself is incredibly secure. The cloud is protected through encryption. And so an encryption key is like, a very incredibly difficult thing for anyone to be able to break. So the cloud itself, you can rest assured, is safe. The problem then comes back to us, the users or the consumers, who have like whatever our password is to access our ability to connect the cloud. That's where the security breach happens. And so just to think about, like, on your cell phone, the types, I have a few applications that I send things to the cloud. And so, for example, I have a tape recorder app that I use, and I can either send that to my cloud, or I also can connect that to my Google Drive. So it's important to know, like, which applications you have are sending that information over. There's also the very manual way in which you can move data that's on your phone onto your computer using a FireWire cable. So if you're updating your phone, that's what's happening. So just like kind of an asterisk to remember that piece, because that is one of the places where you will start to see problems happening when survivors come to you with phone safety concerns. Okay, so as I talked about in the beginning of the training, it would be really hard, I think, for us to provide you with all the information on all the apps and all the possible places in which technology safety concerns can arise. What is much better is for us to help you to, one, use the training that you already have in safety planning and just append to that some of these technology safety concerns, so that when you're working with a survivor, you have some type of a rubric that you can move through. So the first thing that I suggest people do is that they gather as much information as possible about what is actually happening. So what is the survivor reporting? And there are a few reasons why I think this is important. Like, one of them is just like overall our cultural lack of literacy around technology. So I think we're more apt to label something or mislabel something with technology than I think we are with other types of crimes. So I like to just ask people, tell me what the survivor is reporting specifically, like who knows what, versus someone coming to me and saying, oh, okay, like this person's cell phone has been hacked. Like, then I would ask, like, oh, well, how do you know that? So just really get into the gathering all the information to get a comprehensive picture of what's happening before you label it. And we're going to go through a whole example so that you'll be able to work through some of these things. The next is to, if once you're able to diagnose what has happened, you want to think about all of the options available to remedy the situation. And some of those might not have anything to do with the device itself. So I think 2 kind of leads into 3, and these are things that you all know as folks who help survivors to safety plan, which is that what might seem from the outside as like the easiest track forward is riddled with all of these barriers, right? So like survivors can't just quote unquote leave and walk out. They have all, you know, whether it's economic barriers or additional fear of harm to their family by leaving. And so you're in the very same way that you mitigate all of those safety concerns when you're helping someone to flee any other situation, the same thing is happening with tech. So I wouldn't say don't just focus on the device itself. The 4th is that you want to consider the economic barriers to whatever safety plan you're helping the survivor to craft. And those, you know, for example, when, you know, we would often talk about like early on, or it wasn't really that early, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, survivors would have their cell phones taken away from them when they would go into shelter. And now that we know, we have much more trauma-informed practices around this, we realize that this is a huge financial barrier. And this isn't just the cost of replacing the device. It's also the cost of what, you know, taking away a tool that someone is going to need to restabilize in their life. So in the previous training, I have shown some statistics around folks that are what we're calling smartphone dependent. And so, you know, previous conversations about the digital divide. So the digital divide is that kind of like breaking down who has access to technology based on economic resources. That used to be all centered on the topic of who owns a home computer. That's not the case anymore. Now it's who has access to broadband and so having access to internet. So you might guess that folks that are in urban environments have a lot of access to that versus folks in rural environments don't. And so people that are most marginalized are using their smartphone, whether they have a cell phone plan or they're accessing free Wi-Fi, as their lifeline to everything from finding a job. So there's statistics around 50% of Latinos use their smartphones to apply for jobs, accessing information about their healthcare. So 75% of Black and Latinos use their smartphones to access information about their health. And in any other type of thing, in addition to just making sure that they have a means of communication with their family. So the smartphone is not just, as you know, a means of communication any longer, is a life tool. And then the 5th piece is to plan that the process will be iterative. And again, I think this is something you all know, which is that the situation is always changing. And part of what will help us to be there with survivors through this with the technology piece is that we try to stay attuned to like what the new advances are bringing us. So tech literacy is important for us to always be keeping ourselves on top of, and also using all of these opportunities to build tech literacy with our clients. So I'll just pause. If anyone has any additional things that they would want to add to this list, what I'm really hoping to do is that, you know, after we finish all the tech training, the webinar series, that we'll be able to provide this as a model for people that want to start doing more tech safety.
I just want to encourage everybody, as we say at the beginning of this web training, is that we're trying to make this as interactive as possible to really hear, because you're the ones who are actually working directly with victims and survivors. So Nicole and I could put this together for you, but you're really the experts on knowing what is happening on the ground. So we really want to hear from you. What's the need? What are you seeing? So I'm really encouraging you all to participate a little bit more. If you can also turn your cameras on just to like as you're being more interactive, I can see your faces too, please. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show folks where they can navigate to this next resource that I would like people to take a look at. So if you go to the link that I set at the beginning of the chat, it will take you to my website where you can click on the tech. It should take you directly to the tech safety page. And here you can download a copy both of this PDF, of this training in PDF, and the cell phone safety chart. As you can see, it will be much easier for you to read on your own page. And now I'm going to go ahead and navigate back to my own screen. So this tool was developed while I was at Newton Wellesley. You can't see, if you have it on your screen, you'll be able to zoom in a little bit more closely. But at the bottom, it gives a link to the report that was created by NNEDB. And so the reason why we created this resource is because as an advocate, I would have clients come in who had things that were wrong with their cell phones. They weren't sure that if they had been hacked. In many, many cases, what they thought was happening was probably far scarier than what was happening. And I think that this just speaks to like the way in which technology is being abused as like the most mundane. And I think just to highlight that like really the basic things are where we need to be focusing our attention. And so as the advocate, when someone came forward with this, it was just a sea of information to try to get through. And you don't know what to trust. And we always rely on NNEDB because they are the leaders in the field when it comes to tech abuse. And so I went to their website, I downloaded this report, and the report, although like very comprehensive, it's hard, right? It's hard for a well-educated person or anyone with some level of tech literacy to be able to read, a several-page document and then like digest that material, listen to what the survivor is reporting, and then try to help them figure it out. So what we did is we spent some time really dissecting that document and then cross-checking it with a number of other resources online to help survivors to figure out what might be wrong with their phone. And so this goes back to, if you remember on the technology safety model, the first part, which is just collecting the information. So the first three questions are, who have you talked to? The primary questions it's asking is, what information does the perpetrator seem to know? So then, do they know who you've talked to? Do they seem to know your location? Do they know details of your conversation? And then from there, they can flow through the chart. There are tips, so all the safety tips that are available of what they might be able to do if they answer yes or no to these questions. And then it can help to narrow down, okay, something might be wrong with your phone. And as you can see, there are probably a number of places where, that the survivor realizes that maybe they were inadvertently sharing their location in an application they weren't aware of. And so that will help to really prevent people from immediately just like going to their cell phone provider or getting rid of their phone or replacing the phone.
Nicole?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt
Yep.
you. Would it be possible for you to zoom in into the screen? To zoom in?
I can do it on this one.
And can you also type you already gave us on the website.
Do you need it again?
Where on the side do we find the resource? So because I guess you clicked really quick on it.
Oh, sure. So if you just, it should take you to this page and you just scroll up to the top.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and then you can just click on it here and it should download, or it downloads within the window. This will probably be easier for me to show people.
Yeah.
Everyone. Okay. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, my apologies. It doesn't let me zoom in once I'm on the presentation side. So this is an excellent tool to use. You're free to like print as many of these as you want, anything. My goal is to try to at least update this, once a year with any additional information that we get. And I think that these are the types of tools that we need to be creating beyond, just more documents, because these are like fast and ready. You can sit with someone and quickly ask them a few questions to figure out what might be going wrong.
I could also download it and send it to everybody who is on this call today, and also for those who are not able to join us but want to have access to the web training.
Yes.
Today. So I'll send it out.
Great. Okay. So this next scenario, I'm going to go ahead and read to everyone. And these are the questions that I want us to be thinking about. What types of questions would you want to ask the survivor to get more information? What are some possible tech concerns? And if we were going to do a safety plan, what would some of the benefits and drawbacks be? Are there any harm reduction options available? So this is based off of a few different cases that I have personally worked with while I was at Newton Wellesley. Kathy came to my office after having been divorced to her ex-husband, Mike, for several years. She said that the separation had been okay and that things had been relatively uneventful for the past few years. Recently, however, she had started dating. Since she had started dating, she noticed that Mike's behavior was becoming more erratic and controlling. She hadn't told him that she was started dating, but somehow he seemed to know where she was going and would have aggressive outbursts with communicating with her after she had been on dates. The only person Kathy had told that she had started dating was her sister, Carol. Carol knew Kathy's ex, but as far as she knew, they had no contact. Kathy's main means of communication was her cell phone and the computer she used at work, which as far as she knew was securely protected and would be hard to hack. The situation with Kathy quickly began to escalate. Her ex-husband Mike had started showing up at her work and was threatening her. So she spoke with the security to make sure that everything was in place so that she could be safe at work. And the security also assured her that her online communication at work was secure. Just in case, Kathy had begun to log into her personal email, her credit cards, and all of her websites on her cell phone. Sometimes she would take public transportation to dates and not her car, but it still seemed that Mike knew where she was going. So she had narrowed down that it was probably not a GPS tracker in her car. Somehow she thought her cell phone must have been hacked. So she went to her cell phone provider and she got a new phone and got rid of the old one. At this point, Kathy had reached out to an advocate. The abuse had continued to happen and in fact was getting much worse. So Kathy was starting to think that there might be more terrifying ways in which her ex was stalking her that she just didn't know of. She'd also begun to be concerned that her sister might have been leaking some of this information to her husband because the sister was the person that helped during the visitations. She also had decided that she would change her work schedule and she would probably also stop dating. what do you think that Kathy should do next in terms of her tech safety? And I'm going to come on to the screen so we can just have a conversation about this. So does anyone want to jump in? If not, I'm going to ask Deanna what she thinks.
I'm going to unmute everybody in case those who are joining us on the phone may want to say something.
And if you've by chance heard this scenario before, don't give away.
Do you want to ask your question again, Nicole?
Sure. So my question is, and this is just a really simple question. What do you think is the next thing in terms of tech safety that Kathy should do? The other question you could ask would be, what other questions would you want to ask Kathy?
Lauren's microphone isn't working, but I'm wondering what app she was going to talk to her sister.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay. So there's some question about maybe that the app could be sending the information. Like, let's say she's on not a secure means of communication. Okay.
Encrypted or something, I guess, maybe. It's not. Somebody else said, when was the password changed in her location setting?
Okay. So in this scenario, Kathy got a brand new phone. So she changed her password, she got a brand new phone, and that it still seemed that, and she's only using her cell phone for all forms of her digital communication.
Is she sending pictures?
Let's say we'll say for the purposes of this, she had stopped sending pictures.
Okay. What apps she has on the phone?
Mm-hmm. What about Facebook? Okay, great. So I'll answer a few of these. Facebook. Let's assume that Kathy was on Facebook. So we would definitely want her to go in and go through all the privacy settings, which we're going to walk people through those in our social media training. But that could be. But let's say she has secured everything on Facebook. Facebook is safe. Or maybe she's, currently not even on Facebook and she's still noticing that it's happening. She got, and to answer the question, she got her cell phone from Verizon, her new phone from Verizon. She didn't buy an off-market cell phone that might be not secure.
Is her ex-partner somehow still listening on her billing account or cell phone plan?
Great. So that's another good one to consider, is that, and that helps to illustrate the point where it may not be the device, right? So it could be the case that her ex-partner still has permissions on her account. So that wasn't the case in this, but that's a good point to highlight. My question for the group is, who thinks that Kathy should get another cell phone? Great. So that's good safety planning. So someone said she should get an emergency phone. So it's true. A really good thing to think about is trying to parse out the different tasks that someone is using their smartphone for. So you can have a hope line where you're just using that for communication, or you could, find another device that you're using for the computing services of your phone. So one example that I have given before is that we had a survivor who knew that she was getting tracked by her iPad. And so she had asked if she should, cut her. Oh, I think someone might be.
People, but I've pulled a couple things we can maybe read.
I'm going to mute everybody else just in case. Sorry. Okay, I think I found the one.
All right. Okay, so the example I was providing is that the survivor had known that she was being tracked through her iPhone or her iPad. And so at this point, she was still living with her perpetrator and was planning on leaving. And when she came to work with us, she wanted to know she should get rid of her iPad because he knew everywhere she was going. I'm curious, from your DV advocate perspective, would you recommend that she just outright get rid of her iPad? Yes and no, and why? Well, okay, repeat this. So the survivor has an iPad, and she knows she's getting tracked through it, and she wants to get rid of it. She's also trying to leave her partner, but she's still living with him. So exactly, what Lauren said is spot on. So to remove the device, although the device is the axis of the abuse, right, at that point, would be more dangerous for the survivor. So what we did instead is we helped her to get another phone. So we had a smartphone that wasn't connected to anything, and she would just keep that smartphone in her office at work, and she would use that to access her emails to her attorney. And so what it helped helped her to do is make her safety plan until she was really ready to leave, and didn't tip off the perpetrator, who at that point was it was easier for him to feel like he had some type of tacit control over the situation, seeing, maybe she's going to drop the kids off at school, than to have all of that access removed at the time when she's trying to plan. So that's exactly right, what Lauren said. So going back to this scenario with Kathy, let's say that she's checked all of her, all her applications, nothing is being shared that way, and she has a brand new cell phone, but she's thinking maybe he has implanted things somewhere. What would you recommend? Is there any part of this scenario where you think something could have gone awry in the safety planning? Okay. Deanna looks like she's thinking.
No, I was just reading what.
Okay. So the question I always ask folks that's kind of becomes the aha moment is, when you get a new cell phone, what's the first thing that you do?
Turn it on.
Turn it on, and then you want to get it all jazzed up and ready to go. So you had your whole life on your phone. So what would you do?
Check my calendar and my email.
Yep. Add your contacts. Exactly. So or check your calendar. So all those things, what we do is we plug our phones in to our computers. We take all the 5,000 photos, we upload them back on, and then we take a brand new phone and upload everything. So what had happened was the first phone had actually some spyware had been implanted. And so then she just transferred all of those files from the new phone to the old phone by connecting it through her computer. So it's that question of thinking about where exactly your data is going. One of the questions people often have is can the spyware be put remotely? And at this point, no, the technology isn't as advanced such that it can come through Bluetooth. You still have to have physical access. So at some point, he did have physical access to her phone. But the new phone, he didn't. It was a matter of poor data practices, basically. And so when you get a new phone, what we recommend that people do is, much of a pain as this is to manually put the contacts in. And not just transfer it. So this is like a really obvious thing. And when we realized this, we helped to like de-escalate her fear, because her world was becoming increasingly more small. Like she didn't know who to trust or what could possibly be happening. And in fact, it was just the same very basic thing that was causing the abuse to continue. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions on that one?
Can you see the chat, Nicole, or do you want me to read it?
Oh yeah. With spyware, would you be able to see it being used in a location or privacy settings? So we don't have a training planned on spyware. Was something we could consider doing. I think the big thing for people to note is that there are some symptoms that your phone will exhibit if there's something something like that. And many of those are on the cell phone safety chart. The big one is, are you noticing a huge amount of like data being taken up, or your battery is going low? Because these services require a lot of data.
I think something to also think about is a lot of families. I know I have an iPhone, and pretty much all my stuff, like my personal stuff, is Mac products. So I tend to connect all of them, and we had a family plan. So think about like the cloud sometimes as well.
Right.
Of like sharing with your significant other or friends or family, because this also, the moment you get another device, or the moment that you get or erase a device, or your location settings or whatever, it would automatically notify whoever is as part of the cloud as well.
No, that's a really good point. And I think this reminds me of one of the pieces that we covered. I'm going to quickly read this and then I'll go back to what I was saying. Do you have information on Google browsers, and if there is a link to safety breach and centralizing cloud data? I think it's a password issue only. So then the second piece of the question, or would it be a password issue only? I think it is a password issue. I mean, even in the case of probably the big one everyone knows about is Yahoo, right? Like this last week, Yahoo had, I don't know how many millions of accounts that were hacked. And it is ultimately like, it's at the consumer piece that we're having. And I think bringing it back to what we know about like intimate partner and sexual violence are most frequently perpetrated by people we know, people with that like acquaintance level. They're not at the majority of this is not being perpetrated by strangers. And this, to me, it's like an analog with the tech abuse, right? So the types of stuff that's happening at that really high level, like let's say, I think people are more concerned that the government is following them. And that's not particularly like apropos to the types of things that we're seeing, which is like more like what Deanna mentioned, which is that it's the way in which you're sharing your cell phone plan with your family members. And if your family member is the person that's abusing you, then that's where we should be focusing our lens. Does that help to answer the question that came in the chat? Great. Okay, so
I think many of the times what I have seen and heard as well is that it's not so much the phone settings or your location, but thinking about, you really have to be savvy about all the different ways where this person may have access to your address, like phone banking. Like most of the things that we do now currently, we do it electronically. So when we apply for jobs, when we are doing any online banking, or like everything gets changed online, and that's how we're virtually doing everything online. So the moment that happens, that person or people may have access to your settings in terms of knowing when you change your address, for example, on your bank account. They may have access without you even knowing. So you may have to go to the settings as well on your online banking and check that there's not a second or third party that also gets access to your account without you even knowing that that person may have access to that. So same thing with email. You can forward your emails to other accounts. So you may not know that this person had already accessed or forward your email to another account without you even knowing. They did it previously before you left them, or before before you separated this person. So that's another way that this person may have access what you're doing, your email accounts, your bank accounts. So there's, to me, what I have seen and what I have heard, and I think even Erica Olson mentioned this, that there is other ways that people are really finding issues with people finding them, that it's not necessarily related to your phone or your iPad. So I think we need to be a little bit more savvy about the ways that we're getting this information and how we're getting this information out there.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on with it, which is, I think it just expanding, thinking about the way in which our lives are completely become like molded technologically. And it's not just about making the right choices in the beginning or the safest choices for us, but also like the maintenance, right? Because the settings do change. And how many of us, probably ignore when we get the email, like, oh, new information, like your security settings have changed, and really walking through and understanding that, because it sounds to me like, in the case of some of these things with the banking, that when you signed up, those are probably not options. And then you just kind of like leave it and don't go back. And if you're not doing like this good housekeeping, as I'm calling it, or like, tidying up your technological space all the time, you don't know. And because we are so reliant, like I know for example, will accept like, oh, share your location. Yes. Cause I need to like check into yoga or whatever. I don't like in that moment, I can't like diagnose my cell phone. But to go back and always be just making sure that you have what you need, you understand why it's there. So I am going to do another one of these. If you've done a training with me before, I love these. It is a survey. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again.
So pull your phones out.
Fire them up. All right, so for anyone who's not done one of these before, it's really simple. I would actually recommend that you do the web browser option. People seem to have an easier time with that. So you just navigate to the site pollev.com/NicoleCastile728 and you answer this question, or you can do it via text and you text Nicole Castile 728 to the number 22333. So you're texting the words to the number 22333. And then everyone can respond there and we will see the takeaways. Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that one. That really long one that someone just submitted. That was great. I would say that in a nutshell covers a few modifications in terms of basic settings. Passwords, location services can be very helpful in combating most common occurrences of tech abuse. Be thorough.
That's a really good one.
This is great. Super helpful. I'm going to navigate away for a second and just come back. Yeah, I think what I really appreciated about everything everyone's saying is that, you know, one, it's highlighting that it's like the really banal things that are causing all of this. And two, that it's going to require, you know, a lot, like an iterative process. I really think, you know, we're going to have a lot of good information that we can create as a toolkit. And I feel like I've done quite a bit of research on this at this point and nationally. And I think it would be really cool, like if Massachusetts rolled something out like this, like we have a modified safety plan that's with tech in mind. I think that would be really excellent. So I'm towards the end of my presentation. We finished a little bit earlier because I usually allow for more time for discussion. But if there's any like questions or things that you wanted me to cover during this, please answer the question. I might have the answer for you. And if I don't, then I will definitely look the answer up and then we'll deliver it on January 24th. Okay. So that the spyware one, I will find more for that and I will deliver the next one. So the next question someone has is there safety software out there for survivors? So I'll answer that question in two ways. One is that there's software that like helps you, like antivirus software for your cell phones. That's not like that commonly used and it's not specific for survivors, but that does exist. There are a lot of applications.
It's expensive.
Right. And there are a lot of applications that will help survivors in various ways. We'll be going through that and using technology for social change. But again, there's not one thing that's going to like do all of this for us. They all like all the applications like deal with one piece, you know, or they have a different objective, whether that's like documenting evidence or ensuring that you can safely connect with your family members. But none of them are going to be like the prevention, I guess.
I think some of the things that I may want to recommend when using apps would be like a text app or a webcam. Some of our member programs had mentioned that they want to start using their webcams as a way of communicating with survivors. So one of the things that I'm cautious about, and I recommend this to everybody who's trying to use that, is to really think about the app and going to the settings and going to all the information that this app is providing you into the privacy settings.
Right.
That's the place to go. And really read through the privacy settings. Who are they going to provide their information to?
Right.
When you are signing up for this app, you have to provide them with your full name, your phone number. Are they going to be sharing this information with other companies? So think about those things in terms of confidentiality. Also, are the apps fully encrypted? So what it means is, so WhatsApp, it's one of the apps that is fully encrypted. What it means that is your information is not necessarily safe and shared with others. So think about this when you use any software, regardless of what it is or what app you're using. Really read the whole privacy settings, because most of us actually don't do that.
No, that's true. Signal is a great app. Okay, we'll make sure to look into that one. And I quickly just shared with you the link that we'll go through in more detail. But in the meantime, because I think it's a couple months before we go into that in more detail. But this is the NNEDV. They survey as many apps as they can as they're coming out. I feel like this was probably updated in July, so it might not have everything. But it certainly goes through quite a few of them, and it gives you the framework to be thinking through it.
Yeah, and if you have any questions regarding a particular software that you're trying to use, just send me an email and I can help you, walk you through like what you should be looking at, what recommendations I may have heard from other tech safety advocates. So I can definitely do that.
Does anyone else have any other questions? So what I'm
heard of Signal. Have you heard of Signal?
I haven't heard of Signal. So what I'm hearing from folks is they want to have more information about the spyware, some information potentially about antivirusware on cell phones, and the app discussion. Tile. Oh yeah, good question. I don't have any more information about Tile, but I, as you know, maybe it's like the DV advocate. It's like I saw Tile and was immediately like, I'm just waiting for this to be used. I haven't heard of anyone. Well, first I'll explain what Tile is. So Tile is like these little tags that you can put onto like your keychains or like, wherever you're going. And so then if you lose your belongings, the application will tell you where to find it. Obviously we can think of ways in which someone could use that to perpetrate abuse. I haven't heard of anyone encountering that particular type of thing yet, though.
For the question about conferences, like phone conferences, software, again, first I will ask the person, the survivor or the victim, what their means of access. Because I think like even though Nicole mentioned that a lot of us like nowadays are using them, I would first ask the survivor or the victim, like, do you have access to this software, and what kind of software they're going to use? Is it going to cost any money for them? So I guess that would be my first questions that I would have. And then again, the encryption of the app or the software that you're going to be using. I think that it just goes back to that. Do you have anything, Nicole?
No, I would agree with that. I think that probably with regards to the encryption, I think that is especially important to pay attention to, because sometimes companies that have more of the marketing potential, they will look safer because they just like can pay for the bells and whistles, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they understand or that they have invested in encryption. And I know that from like working on databases, for example. So yeah, absolutely. You should find out like what their policy is on encryption. So someone asked a question of any tips on evaluating app permissions in which to allow or block. I would say, like, and again, like to quote like Erica, privacy is on a continuum, right? Everyone makes a personal choice about privacy for themselves. But I would say only keep the ones on that you have to use the location setting to make it work. Like it's dependent on it. Beyond that, I would just keep it off, because the only benefit that you derive is like from the perspective of a consumer, right? So that you're getting things that are sent to you that are more like tailored towards your interests or your geographical location. So unless you're required to, I would just,
I would also, there is a website, and I will send you the link to everybody, where you can compare different apps yourself, and you just put them side by side, and it will compare the location settings, confidentiality, anything that you may want to know or you may be concerned about. So I'll send you the link of that.
Okay, that'd be great. And then another person asked about information about teens and social media and how it can be used safely. So that's definitely something we can maybe do a different training on, maybe for Teen DV Month. We've touched a little bit on it before with certain trainings we've had. I think the big takeaways are that teens as digital natives, so this means that they were born into a world in which tech was fully melded into their experience, don't necessarily have tech literacy. And a lot of even schools are starting to have what they're calling tech civic education. So they're teaching teens to understand what to use, or where their information is going, just the basics. So that's something we can definitely do. Kristen also likes that teen social media training. Yeah, we could do it.
We can probably put it on the training that we're doing on January 24th, which is related to social media.
Yep.
With a focus on teens.
Maybe I can get some people that work with teens to join us.
Yes, that would be great.
Let's see. Actually, I was wondering about permissions beyond location settings. Android apps can list a slew of others, and newer OS allows for some amount of blocking them, though not without getting warnings saying the app won't work. Yeah, that's exactly what Jessica was saying. There are certain apps that you can't use without turning the location on, unfortunately. So I think you just make a personal choice on whether you feel comfortable allowing that. And yes, so the slides are shareable, but we'll quickly go back to answer the first part of what Jessica was asking about the Android apps. Maybe we should look a little bit more into seeing if there are any, I can do some research to see if there's anything different with the Android apps. My guess is that it's the same with iOS, which is that, yes, there are certain apps that will force you to share your location to make them work. So just thinking about that.
Oh no, someone said happened with your camera or, whatever. Sorry.
Okay. Oh no. Jessica, did that answer your question, or was there another specific question you had about the Androids? I don't see an answer. So I'm going to go then to the last question someone had. Are the slides shareable? Yes, they're on my website, and you can just download them. They're in PDF form. And Deanna, I think, also emailed a copy.
Yeah, I sent it to everybody today and then on Friday. But I'll be sending the just a reminder to everybody to do an evaluation for this web training. So I'll be sending that out, the link. And I also, just a reminder for the January 24th Fundamentals of Online Data, Web and Social Media. Again, if you all don't have any questions,
It's hard for people to understand what the permissions are actually for. So I'm wondering how to better help non-tech savvy individuals evaluate them and make decisions on what to do. Okay, so that could be helpful. So what I'm hearing from what Jessica is saying is like maybe a checklist that explains like, when you say yes to this location, think about where that information might be going and for what reason. So something like a tool probably needs to be developed there. Okay, so I can write that down as something for us to create. Then Kristen asked, is the cell phone safety flowchart able to be sent out? Yep, so it's also downloadable on the website, but I think Deanna's also going to send it out.
Mm-hmm.
I have a list of questions that I can ask students attending class for apps I can share.
Yeah, that would be great. Please.
All right. Thanks, everyone. That was really helpful. It gives me a really good sense of, what are the things that would be most useful. And I think the explaining the terminology or understanding like what the purpose is for the permissions would be useful. All right, well, I don't have anything else.
Okay.
I think we're wrapping up a little earlier.
Okay.
And
So if you have any questions and we were not able to address them today, please feel free to send them to me, and I'll make sure that I send it to Nicole, or Nicole and I can respond them. I just want to again remind you really quick that we have sort of like a continuation of this series on January 24th on Fundamentals Online Data, Web, and Social Media. And I will be sending also an evaluation. Again, we want to hear, we just want to get your feedback. It will help us better understand if what we're covering is helpful, or if we need to cover more, or if the time is too long or is too little. Just anything that you can comment about today's, and also if you attended the one before last month, please feel free to do that. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everybody, for being
bye. Hope everyone has a good break.
Thanks.
Happy holidays.